walking within the maze of sailboat hulls. And sometimes actually I think it's strange, isn't it, how you just have faith they're not going to fall on you. I did this the other day when it was windy, and in the middle I was thinking, if one of these blew over, yeah, you won't want to be underneath it, would you? And buildings blow over sometimes, so, you know. Anyway, I've actually seen footage before of boats, you know, falling off stands, and, you know, we're right under that, it would hurt. Anyway, all in the name of getting some good footage. Right, in this week's... I need to stop saying this week's. Okay, in this episode, we're going to talk about finances and how I wound up walking around the shipyard underneath lots of different sailboats in the one place I said, other than home, that I didn't want to go. I think everybody knows by now I'm in Marseille. And depending when this video reaches you, and if you're new here, you might be thinking, do you not have a boat to save off the rocks? It's an ongoing project. But for the sake of recording and to make all of this make a little bit more sense, I probably need to talk to you about, firstly, how I ended up in this mess, if you want to call it a mess, and secondly, why I let it go on so long. And I've mentioned a few times I had a plan months ago, and obviously that's not really come together. But I was talking to someone the other day, and we're in agreement I might be the poorest sailing channel on YouTube. I might also be the the slowest progress channel on YouTube. And if you do know any poorer sailing channels on YouTube, mention them in the comments, because I'm going to go watch them, because maybe I need some tips on how to survive at this point. But I'm going to go back to the boat and we're going to get into the thick of it. Financially, what went wrong? So here goes. So I guess what we first have to do is talk about, you know, the first year. So recently, you know, as I've mentioned in the little intro to the video, October, you know, it feels like the beginning of the year and the end of the year at the same time, because it's when I started all of this in October 2022. October 2023 is when that first adventure, if you want to call it that, came to an end. But yeah, we then you know, we got stuck where I then spent year 2 of doing this, and then we just about got out of there, and you know, we were stuck still. Really, we only left the port out of having to, basically. We knew it weren't the best thing to do, we knew it weren't a good idea, but it's what we did. Anyway, October again. Next October I'm going to be nowhere near a sailboat. Whether I'm in the Caribbean, looking unlikely, or here, I'm just not going to be on a sailboat. Maybe October will be the month I have to go visit relatives from now on. October, do not be anywhere near a boat. But that said, let's talk about how financially the first year unfolded, I guess. So that first year, way back, October 2022, what happened from there? Alright, so the first year, and I'm going to summarise this quite quickly, because we're not really here to talk about what's happened before, but because there's some new people probably watching this for the first time, we'll quickly touch on it. So November and December 2022, I received a final wage, which from the money I received in the final wage, you know, there was not a bonus, but holiday pay, over hours, etc. Largely it paid an annual berth I had at the time, because my priority the year before doing this weren't, as some people might think, saving up to go and sail full time on a sailboat. It was working, and I had a boat in the port which I lived on to escape work. I've said that quite a few times before, However, I wasn't actually planning on what happening to happen. This weren't always the plan, so it's worth mentioning that. Had it have been, I'd have probably prepared a bit better. However, as I say, I did have an annual place and, you know, a big chunk of money paid that. So it was due to run out. I had a few months left on it, and I said to the port, if I pay X amount, can I leave now? And it was probably a mistake maybe to do that, but this is going to be about finances, not what we should or shouldn't have done at the time. Plus November and December, and it was never seen on YouTube because phone footage getting lost before I had the GoPro. I think you see part of it. The first maiden voyage over to Saint-Tropez, Port Grimaud, where I then ended up actually spending quite a bit of money on ports there, which, let me just flip these chicken bird off them. Ah, man. Use a spatula. I don't have a spatula, it's floating around in my shipwreck. Yeah, we ended up spending quite a lot of money on more expensive ports, and again we're going to keep it about finances. I'm not going to go into detail about why I chose to go where I went at the time, but it took quite a large chunk of money. The key thing with these early months is they were the key months. So before finishing my job, I'd looked at a little motor ketch. It was 10 metres, so not huge, a little bit bigger than the boat I had before, and looking back, I should have made it happen, because that was going to be the last time I had a chunk of money more than, you know, since then there's never been upwards of €1,000 in my bank, never. So, you know, that was the last time there was a chunk of money. And, you know, what I did do with the bits of money that was left over, I threw it into the boat I had, because I didn't know if I could afford this other boat. This other boat, with what I ended up doing, would have been perfect. And I loved it. It was, you know, teak deck, but it had been epoxied over. There was a little bit of woodwork doing, and at the time I didn't really trust my ability to be able to do it. Whereas actually looking back, that minor bit of woodwork, even if I'd have paid for it to be doing afterwards, I'd have had this beautiful sailboat. We can go on about it now. It was £5,000, and it's only later on I found some people that knew the previous owner and was like, oh, it was an absolute bargain. It sold really quickly, so, you know, somebody who probably knew more about it than me looked and decided it was a good idea. Anyway, we didn't do that, and what we ended up doing was throwing money from that moment on and going forwards into the sailboat that you've seen me on up until, you know, recently. So to put, and I've not ever done the whole YouTube thing where you go through what everything cost, but, you know, when I look around me now and think, what do you still have of value that you spent over that, you know, that first year? And it's a lot of it was replacing broken stuff like laptops, phones, but it just doesn't feel like I have a lot to show for it. And that's the thing with there's a lot you don't see, such as, you know, paint, materials, etc, etc, etc. And, you know, if you're looking at a free boat that is a project, you really, there's going to be a lot more cost involved than you think, or than I thought at the time. And that wasn't a free boat. I paid £2,500 for it. So we actually calculate how much I ended up spending on that boat. By the time it was done, you know, 2.5 in, and we've spent thousands afterwards, you know, on a lot of it on mistakes and things that wasn't necessarily needed, a lot on stuff that has since broke. So yeah, them first 2 months were key, because there was a few months where I had a chunk of money already, and maybe in hindsight we could have made some better decisions with it. Anyway, that's November, December 2022. January 2023. Right, January 2023. So, and before I do this, I am going to just say quickly, I am going to do an episode that marks 2 years living on a sailboat, which is more based not on finances, but maybe based on why I did what I did some of the times, a little bit more about what went on, and how I ended up in this position, not financially, just generally in life. So that will be coming. If you're new here, because there's been quite a few people new here recently, I'm sure loads of people are waiting to see what I'm doing with a shipwrecked boat, and as I've mentioned already, you know, it depends which order the videos come out. I can't complete the video about the shipwrecked boat until it stops being a shipwrecked boat, hence why I'm not recording that right now. But back to it, January 2023 financially. So the last bit of money going back from October / November, December, I then went to the UK. Financially, because that's what we're here to talk about, you know, that cost a bit of money. And when I actually managed to get back on New Year's Eve, I had zero, and January was largely spent waiting it out. So in France, if you've worked, you are entitled to some help from what they call the chômage, and if you've worked a set amount of months, you can receive a percentage of what you earn for a set amount of months. However, January was waiting for it to go through, sort of thing. So January financially, there was nothing. We were sat in Saint Raphael port, and the port, this is the first time I had a port on my case, like, all the time. And you maybe have seen in some of the footage from back then, you know, some of the stuff I'd bought in October, November, December, I was then like desperately trying to sell in order to pay the port and get out of there. I did end up paying that port in full, but again, a large chunk of money for January went on being in that port. The issue was, and a lesson to be learned here for anyone, including myself, if you're going to pay the daily rate, but you're going to end up spending a month somewhere, you're better off just committing to the month, because I didn't want to do that, because I didn't really want to stay there. So I ended up paying the daily rate, but the monthly rate would have been a bit cheaper. Other expenses in that month was literally just food. And I remember actually, and people said, that month was a real battle to not lose too much weight. It was leaving there, and some of the videos that followed, I lost more than intended. You know, I wasn't really intending to, but trying to make the best of the situation, financially not having that much money, was trying to embrace not eating that much and making sure I was eating enough of the right thing. But if I'm being real now about it, I'm thinking back, was I eating enough? Probably not. Probably not. And definitely not enough of the right things. That is a lesson that I've had to learn since, which I'll get on to. That it was probably more a case of not eating the right things rather than not eating enough, to be honest. But there was a very drastic, like, going from some of the early videos to then January, where suddenly I'm just getting really skinny really quickly, and it wasn't ideal. But, you know, largely I'd sell something, for example, and I was selling stuff, you know, that I just had from life before doing this anyway, and a lot of it I sold a lot cheaper than I should have, for the sake of paying the port a lot of the time. And that's something that has changed quite a bit now, is I'm sure every port thinks they're priority, and for me now, if I was in a port, it's not necessarily that there's no intention to pay them, but let's say I had 18 euros on a day and the port price was 18 euros for that day, and it's a case of them potentially waiting until I had it, or me not eating. Back then there was this real, like, you've got to pay the port, you've got to pay the port. Whereas as time's gone on, I'd make sure I ate, if that makes sense. Because it's a bit of a trap. You really can end up, if you're doing this with a very limited budget, just giving the bits you've got to ports and then not being able to do what you need to do in order to get out of the port. So there's a real case of that in January, not last January, the January before, of me just... the cheapest thing to do would have been to leave. However, and this is back before I'd gone and spent any real time at anchor as well, the cheapest thing to do would have been to leave. However, because a couple of days would then pass of me having to find the money to pay the port, I couldn't just leave without paying the port. So you end up then financially spending more money when actually leaving the port would have been the best thing. And I do remember that about that January, that I probably would have left. However, I was always a couple of days behind paying the port, and I'd need to catch up in order to then actually be able to leave. And that was in the episodes, I think, at the time. So that's January 2023. February 2023. Really, that was then, we went back over to Saint-Tropez. We, again, spent a bit more money than we should have, because we got stuck there a bit because the engine broke and the battery got flat and various other things. And we ended up having to go into Port Grimont, where we stayed for a little while. And again, the money we'd been waiting from finally came. But quite quickly, a chunk of that went on staying in Port Grimont, buying a new battery because the battery broke and various other things. And February going into, it was really a case, and this pattern followed for the rest of the months. February, March, April, May, June, July, up until really starting the boat trips, where the beginning of the month you'd find that you've got to pay off all the things that need paying off, phone bill, you've run up things that need replacing, etc. I'd find every month by the 10th of the month, I'm like, man, I ain't got any money left. And it would be the second half of the month would be really having to then survive. And one thing I learned and would do differently now, I think, I know, is I'd try do the surviving at the beginning of the month. I'd instead, some money's come in. Let's say now I was getting a wage, for example. Some money would come in, and what I should have done was, right, just survive a bit first, because that would feel better, surviving the beginning and you've got some money in the bank, than paying what you needed at the time and then the rest of the month you're like, I'm really stuck now. And yeah, I would always argue I wasn't living lavishly. Like, you've seen the videos, when it comes to food and etc. I weren't eating steak every night. Like, I ate some pretty crappy meals, to be honest. You've seen it. Calamari, we don't even talk about calamari anymore. But I have learnt since, a few food hacks and how to make things taste a bit better. I also learnt that, you can survive off a lot less than people think. And going forward, what I'd like to do is, go a bit more into that. But yeah, that's pretty much then how them months worked. And then we got on to doing boat trips, mainly July and August of that first year. And, that was then quite a big boost. But then the dole, if you like, ran out, etc. So the boat trips probably saved July and August of that year, and take a pause. And then the boat trips then ended, and there was how can we still earn some money? We're going to keep it about finances. Again, there's a lot more could be said about this, but in short, it was, let's try and get somewhere where we can carry on earning money from boat trips. And as well, the boat, and any boat,
things are going to break, and somehow it seems like more things broke than is normal. And not just that, but like phones, laptops, various other things that, you know, if you're living on the water. My mum says to me all the time, I don't know how you lose so many phones. I'll admit, it's bad. There's probably a record there somewhere. However, when you live on a boat on the water, you are more likely. And I didn't lose them all. Like, some broke. In fact, did I lose any? Like, some broke, you know, some ended up in the sea. Some have been stolen, you know, and the same with MacBooks. And I should just say, because MacBook sounds lavish too, it's a 2012. I stick to that model because it allows me to put the interior components and make it just about quick enough to edit videos on. The last one I picked up for 160, so yeah, it's not like I'm spending thousands on laptops. But any laptop would have broke. The one that broke last, a storm came out of nowhere, and it was just inside the hatch on the table, and it just got absolutely soaked, and that was it. Game over. Nearly set on fire, I think. But yeah, things breaking, various other stuff, you know. Even if I'd have begun this with a real large, well, not even a really large budget. And you've probably seen other YouTube channels that have done, you know, 2 years sailing, and they had a fairly big budget, and then afterwards they've realised just how much it costs to maintain stuff, etc. And boom, the budget's gone, and then inevitably the channel ends, or they go on to do something else. But yeah, the plan then was to go and find a way to continue to earn money. As you know, October last year, broke the rigging, bad weather came, wanted to make it over to the Balearic Islands and try just to have a little last push to do some boat trips there, and got stuck for a year. Financially for that year, and this isn't a long story because that brings us to October, November, December and January. So a whole year from that first January. Them months, there was just no money coming in apart from, you know, Patreon. YouTube weren't directly earning any money, not that it really does now. And, you know, you kind of lose that ability to be able to borrow any money from anyone once you no longer can say, oh, yeah, and this money's coming in from here. And we tried how can we make some money off the internet? We tried some things. It didn't really work out. What I would say with trying to make money on the, you know, internet, you see all these videos about drop shipping. I was just having a conversation with someone about this the other day. Unless you've got money to put into it, the chances are it's not as easy as it looks on videos. You need to have the time to do it. And in the winter we had time to do it, but, you know, come January we was flat out of money on a broken boat, and luckily some work came up. Looking back now, financially I'm not sure I ended up that better off from doing the work, and a lot of it's in hindsight of what's happened since. Ideally, well, I was supposed to work until September. We all know this. The job came to an abrupt end. Again, a fairly long story, maybe for another time, but yeah, it came to an abrupt end, and yeah, it's then, you know, May, just before summer, and attention turned to, right, can we take what is then a different boat that was given to me over to where I was the summer before and make some money doing boat trips. I was certain it would be the case, and I did reach out to a few people and be like, look, if I can just get this boat here, the engine's broke, maybe I can pay someone to come look at it and get over there, I'm certain I'll make some money. I've mentioned before I turned down a lot of boat trips without advertising off the back of the summer I was doing it before. So financially at that point, I'm there with no money, turning down boat trips, not a million miles away, and yeah, financially that's annoying. And financially, if we'd advertised over there as well and was in the right place, I think now we'd be in a fairly decent position. But it's not what happened. So there's that. The other thing that really I should mention, because this is quite an important part of this, how I ended up here so far, is in May, when I lost the work I was doing, I did what anyone would do, and this splits hairs, and I know it does, but I'd not worked long enough to get the chômage, like I mentioned earlier in the video, where you have to have worked a certain amount of months and hours, and then you'll get it. However, and this is why maybe going to work at the time was a bad idea, because if I'd have become really stuck before that work came up, I would have inevitably, and I think I did start looking into it, what do you do? Because I am a resident of France, and this is the part that I need to explain. Because I'm a resident in France, I'm like, well, there must be something, because if someone loses the job or whatever, like, there must be some help, you know, back to work help or something. And I found eventually that there was this thing you can get, anyone can get, and you know, you can even get it if you're working and not earning enough money. I think you're entitled to earn up to about €900 per month and still receive the full amount of this, I don't know what you call it, dole. So I was like, right, I've lost my job, you know. It's easy to be too proud and go, I'm not doing that. But why? Like, I've lost a job. I intended to take losing my job a lot further than ended up happening. But you've lost your job. Why not get the thing that you pay into while you are working, you know, social security, which is what it's called here in France. That's not the French, obviously, but yeah, social security is the translation. And you pay into it. Why not then, when you're stuck, use it? And it weren't with the intention of doing it forever, but what does happen if you go a long period of time with no money, finding a job and stuff is going to become a lot harder, because there's like a deterioration in basic things that, you know, you would do. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm going into it now, but for example, now my entire wardrobe of clothes is in bags, needs washing. So yeah, obviously I try and wash what I can in the sink. However, where I am, I need to make it look like I don't live here, which is a story for another time. But, you know, basic things, if you've got very little to no money and you was walking down the street and you found €5, you're going to buy food, aren't you? That's going to be the first thing you're going to do. But other things go out the window. So back to my point, because I've gone off track a little bit. That, you know, it's about €700 a month. In May, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to apply for it. Not forever, but it will be enough, because yeah, I can survive off 200 a month, I'd say. So it's enough that I could probably get the boat back on the water and, you know, move forwards. But there was always going to be a wait for it. I read about it. There's going to be, like, you could be looking at a 2-month wait. So it's fine. And as the episodes do come from back then, you'll see this back at the boat, May/June/July, and I'm like, right, and I'm on, and I'm doing things. These episodes haven't come out yet, because it would confuse people if I put them on now. But that's how it started, and I'm like, I can wait, because I know in a few months. And I did the little thing, was told I would be entitled to it. 2 months passed, I'd not heard anything. 2.5 months passed, didn't hear anything. 3 months passed, had a just an email back, and this is where the issue is with this, and this could take an whole episode just to explain it itself, is the email back said, because your employer, suggesting I was employed, is registered with a different organisation, and I only thought there was one organisation, but apparently my former employer is registered with the Farming Association for some reason, and you know, you wouldn't think that, because why would I think they would be registered with a Farming Association? So you need to contact them. And I'm like, that, you know, that's all it says. And then it doesn't let me log back into the account to try to do anything with it, and you try to make an appointment and it gives you a date like a month down the line, and I'm like, oh, how is this ever going to get sorted? And you know, it's now 5 months since, and I'm still trying to get it sorted. The association I tried to go to, that I'm told to go to, doesn't let me make an account, and you know, I've lived in France for a while, but I've not had to do this before, and it's one of them again where, because you already then don't have any money, you can't pay anyone to help you sort it out, and it's been a nightmare. It has been a nightmare, because you know, I'm then coming on making videos, and it's like, well, why are you carrying this on if you've, like, you know, you ain't got any money coming in, you're never going to get out of the position you're in.